Ive, you were going around with a roving microphone, which was really kind of interesting. You were like doing these man and woman on the street interviews with them as they were finished with their proposals. And I'm just kind of interested in your reaction. You really got some great sound clips from them, but just, were they reluctant to talk about it? Were they? I don't know. What was their attitude about the challenge and their willingness to spew forth their ideas?
Well, it was interesting because I talked to these teams just after they finished their presentations. That's kind of how I timed it. And it was all really fresh in their heads. And so, and when you face a question of performance, right? And because in essence, sometimes that's what it is. When you're facing a panel of judges, you've got to present. It's got to be within a certain amount of time. And I observed some of them kind of rehearsing before they did the presentations, and they really had it down quite specifically. How long was each person going to talk about which subject? They had divided it up. And so by the time I got to them to talk to them, this information was just fluidly kind of pouring out from them because they had just done the presentation. And I figured as a person who's got about 10 years of experience in the radio world myself, I figured that would be the best time to talk to them because it would be fresh in their mind and they would have no problem just kind of talking about what they had just presented. So from a practical point of view, they were ready to talk about it. The other thing, and I'll echo what Phil was saying and also what Diane was saying earlier, was that these students had really thought about this stuff. They had taken months to work on these challenges. They had done their homework and their research. And I remember, I think you told me, Phil, you were saying, wow, there's so much substance here. There's more substance here being discussed during this competition than there is right up the street at Capitol Hill at any congressional hearing.
Well, with one exception, except Diane's committee, the rest of them.
Right. Exactly.
That's right.
Of
yeah,
course.
that's right. Good one.
Present company exclude. Right. And it was funny that so Phil told me that as an aside. And then when one of the presenters was speaking after you, Bob, it was David Wessel from Brookings Institution. He said the same thing. He said he said it publicly. So I think that demonstrates just the degree to which these young people are impressive. And I have to say, as a personal observation, this does give me a lot of hope because your average college student, I mean, when I was in school, I mean, I studied political science and we had our groups of people who were all who would congregate around certain issues, things going on globally, et cetera. But I do not remember a time when I was in school 25 years ago when any of my peers would take an issue this complex and really dive into it, and they really you could tell they're jazzed by it. They like the challenge. They know that they're going to have to deal with this going forward. They know that their Social Security benefits are probably not going to be as generous as what my generation is going to get, or Bob, what your generation is getting. So they know that this is going to affect them personally. It's the same thing about climate change. And it was interesting because a bunch of the teams did address climate change in their presentations. And that's another one where you might think, oh, well, that's not really a budget issue. But I agree with them. I think it is, because the economic impact of climate change is going to be enormous, and it's already starting to be felt. And so the issue of needing to address that and needing to get used to that, and then needing to fund that, right? Because they're anticipating that as a budget increase that's going to throw the debt to GDP ratio more out of whack in the future, that they are going to need to identify a funding source to kind of pay for a lot of renewable energy investment and, to make the infrastructure of this country more resilient to climate change, especially in coastal areas. So a lot of them went to the carbon tax. The only other thing I'll say is that what I found interesting was a lot of these teams did similar things, went to a similar playbook. A bunch of them looked at the value added tax as a way to raise a lot of revenue and tax consumption. But there was one team in particular that chose not to, and they went a different direction. And they chose to go and not implement a value-added tax because they felt it would be too regressive and penalize the middle class too much. And that actually factored into their political calculation. So what's interesting to me is that these young students actually may be more politically attuned than even they would like to admit, because they talked about putting a lot of things that cover a lot of different constituencies into a sort of omnibus package so that everybody would have a piece of something, and so everybody would have something